Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. It is Saturday, the 16th of December, 2023. And I already did a video earlier this morning, and I have family coming to visit from out of province. And so I put on a roast and warming up some brownies and stuff like that. And pretty excited for them to get here. So, and I also have to take my dogs out for a little bit. But, anyways, here we are. Crisis actors. I just shared this on my Instagram, but Anne Frank's stepsister had some interesting things to say about crisis actors even as early as World War II. I've talked about this before. I will continue to talk about this until our levels of government are experts, until they get it right. And I've given this information to them as well, like personally. This is the frustrating part, and they have refused to even look at it. So this is from Befrades. And Frank's stepsister admits liberation of Auschwitz was faked with crisis actors. So this is not denying anything. This is just saying that crisis actors were used.
Point out to you, there are many pictures about the Russian liberating Auschwitz, and there's never any snow. And the snow was honestly that high. Mm-hmm. And so I have some connection with the Russian embassy, and I was there once, and I said, something puzzles me. Those photos are fakes because there's no snow. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, yes, they are not fakes, but when the army came, they didn't have cameras, they didn't photograph. Mm. So only much later, when they realized we should have pictures of it, they took pictures like you see now, but this is definitely not in Auschwitz and not the liberation of Auschwitz. There were not that many people with clothes and children and no snow.
Right, fascinating.
So I think historically we should point this out.
Get it right.
At least it stopped sharing at the end. Good timing. Okay, so I thought that was important to share. Just interesting. Again, who knows? Do your own research on that. I've shared that on my Rumble account way more than on YouTube because I get strikes all the friggin' time on YouTube, and I'm on account number freaking 89. And here's some more information that you will not get on your own through your own searches, because especially if you don't have a VPN, or if you're looking at Google or on uncensored browsers, like, you're not getting this information because the algorithms have changed and the metadata. And so anytime you do any kind of searches, you're getting specifically reinforced and canalized into information that is BS. And I have repeatedly debunked Professor Dave, who's not a real professor, and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye the Science Comedian. These are actors, by the way, as well, and I've shared that information as well. And these people are being seen as experts, which is alarming to me. And even experts, like what people are classifying as experts in even healthcare and transport, like all of these things, and these are literally actors. Anyway, so this is another troll. So top troll, Tyler Oliveira's top round earth arguments, answered by David Weiss. And so I don't even know this guy, Tyler Oliveira, and but he seems to be someone else that deceives people.
Hey man, you ever looking flat earth?
Wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up.
This world is not what you think it is.
Kill the programming.
This world is not what you think it is.
For centuries, man has been conned into believing that they share a common ancestor with apes, and that they live on a spinning ball, flying through infinite space at speeds that no human humanity, although there is no proof for any of these things whatsoever. The verifiable fact is that the earth underneath our feet is a level and motionless plane. Currently, many people are beginning to understand this fact, despite a lifetime of brainwashing from agenda-driven public education and media propaganda.
Close your eyes.
to conclude that the Earth is a sphere, and I will give anyone $1,000 right now, outside, if you can prove me wrong.
Trolling.
I'm not trolling.
So wait, hold on. You were a flat earther, but now you're not? That doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely does. Can't prove a closed mind.
Why is there so much misinformation? Why is there a giant disinformation campaign going on right now when it comes to things like flat Earth? Why are people being hired by like Disney, Walt Disney, you know, the mainstream media giant, so that huge YouTubers like Logan Paul?
New information is being revealed and misinformation shared. Many people cannot cope with accepting certain possible realities. And as a society, we have been indoctrinated in endless ways by religion, media, politics, science, pharmaceutical industry, etc., etc. We've all been led to believe certain things. Our perception has been manipulated, so we can accept certain limitations as being true. However, when a new concept comes to light, people cannot psychologically cope. Their ingrained beliefs must not be challenged. They feel threatened, so they will attack, defend, fight to hold on to an idea. They will completely block it out and disregard what is obvious, evident, and undeniable in order to protect their conditioning, which of course they're not aware of as being their conditioning. So when a new concept is perceived as being so dangerous,
so even with this, like the tropic of Cancer above, obviously within the firmament, the ring traveling here, the equatorial ring, and then the Tropic of Capricorn more on the exterior of this flat Earth plane of inertia. Again, being projected via toroidal fields and hyperboloids on a flat plane of inertia is what I mean by that. This is an electromagnetic reality or universe, light in motion.
It becomes easier to pretend that it's not true, so they can continue doing what they've always done. This narrow-mindedness or choosing to be ignorant is a defense mechanism. They are afraid.
How long have you been a flat earther?
Around 2014, I was doing a podcast about conspiracy theories, and people started sending me flat earth stuff, and I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. I have an open mind, but not to that. And then finally, another researcher who I respect very much said, Dave, you got to look at this. And she sent me a couple videos, and I started watching them with the idea just to disprove it.
Okay.
The flat earth is stupid, right? We all know.
So you were a round earther.
We were all globe earthers.
Got it.
All of us. Because we've been indoctrinated since before preschool.
To first understand the flat earth, I would have to throw away the idea of a globe and relearn an entirely new model for how the planet works.
The world ocean, think of it as a giant lake with all of the continents as islands.
I can roll this now.
The shoreline of our world is Antarctica. The foundation of Antarctica is higher than any other continent. So people go, why can't you fall off the edge of the flat earth? Because if you're on a lake, right, and you sail to the edge of the lake, can you fall off the lake? No, you step up onto the land. We're not allowed to go beyond 60 degrees south. That pink line, the Antarctic Treaty doesn't allow anyone to independently explore beyond that. Now you can spend $10, $20, $50,000 to go to Antarctica for a couple of days. So take you to the little peninsula off the tip of Santiago, off of South America. Now that peninsula is bigger than many countries. And they'll show you some ice and some penguins, but no one's independently allowed to explore beyond it. What's beyond it? I don't know. Early 1900s, they were talking about more land beyond Antarctica. What about this?
Whoa.
This makes sense. What if we lived here? What if this is where we lived? Right there. These are
again, this is all speculation. Like, this is not something that I'm subscribed to, just because I don't have any solid information on this.
Other ponds with their own suns.
Did we live in a tiny pond that is Earth as we know it, trapped by the Antarctic walls and NASA soldiers? Maybe. So Dave was prepared to destroy my top 10 list of reasons why the Earth is round, starting with...
What is that?
But just talking about gravity, so supposedly at the very, very perfect center, there's a molecule that says, I am the center. Everything come to me.
And it's because it has higher mass or it's heavier?
I don't know, man, right? And neither do the scientists that claim it. They said there's not enough gravity to hold all of the solar system together. Okay. So they go, well, there has to be dark matter and dark energy, because if there isn't, then gravity's a lie. When you have a scientific theory and you have 96% of it's wrong, you probably throw out the theory. But in cosmology, they go, no, we'll just make up something to fill in the 96%. If I borrowed $100 from you and I gave you 4, I go, we're even. And you're like, no, where's the other 96? I'm like, well, there's dark dollars. Dark dollars. Are you good with that? Because I understand that gravity is complete and total nonsense.
That's a bold claim, though,
Yeah.
right? For the average person. Ships and the horizon. The horizon is the line at which the Earth surfaces.
It's a bold argument, or whatever you want to call it, for people that have never researched gravity other than elementary school.
In the sky appear to meet.
So when somebody sees a ship appear to go over the horizon, they go, that's Earth curve. But if the Earth was curved, there would be a set distance that it would have to disappear. What do I mean by that? The Earth is 24,901 miles around. According to globe math, the drop is 6 feet at just 3 miles. So if you're a 6 foot tall person standing at the edge of perfectly calm water on a perfectly clear day, you should not be able to see the surface of that water beyond 3 miles because it's dipping over your physical horizon at 3 miles away. But we have pictures where we can zoom in, we can see an oil rig at 17 miles away, whatever. We see many things, but we can see the surface of the water beyond the oil rig. When the water is at complete and total rest, it's perfectly, measurably, testably, provably flat. We can watch a ship go over the horizon, and it looks like it disappears. Yeah. But in reality, we can zoom back in and bring those ships back into view after they completely appeared to disappear. Things disappear because of the angular resolution limits of our eyes.
Interesting.
Because when you're in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, perfectly clear water, we've got your goggles on, you go at one end of the pool, you can't see the other end of the pool. Why? The water's perfectly clear. Because it's not perfectly clear. It becomes more opaque over distance. The air is the same thing. Why is it that I can go out at night, take a picture of the stars, and then every year on the same night forever, I can go out and take this exact same pictures and none of the stars have changed? When we're moving 4.5 billion miles a year, they tell us that the Earth wobbles, right? We move 1 degree every 76 years. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, there's also a shaft that points at Polaris. And we're like, hold on, with that wobble, how is it pointing at Polaris? You know what the mainstream argument is? Well, there used to be a different North Star 2,000 years ago. We just happen to live in the time where it's pointing towards this other star.
I see.
What happens when you open a pressurized can of soda? You open it, what do you hear? What's going on there?
Carbon dioxide's exiting the can?
Well, the gas that's higher pressure than the outside air is equalizing instantly.
Sure.
So you open it, so they try to equalize.
Take a gas, vacuum of equal volume, and we're going to remove the barrier. You know what's going to happen spontaneously, right? The gas is going to fill the available volume.
Is the expansion of a gas.
It's not sucking, it's filling the available volume. And they're going to get to this. But this multidimensional Earth plane, with how things within nature work, it's impossible for this to be a globe with gravity spinning
Into a vacuum. I have in one of these bulbs.
And it has to be a environment, firmament, whatever you want to call it, magnetic ring, electromagnetic ring or field, whatever you want to call it. But like the ice, crystal blue ice, that people have allegedly studied. It's compelling. Again, it's not something that I'm fully convinced with. I'd have to go to these places and see it for myself. But there's people that have I looked at this ice, and that's why there's possibly research labs, whatever you want to call it, within Antarctica because of the cold temperatures. This ice can be studied better there because as soon as you bring it to warmer climates where it warms up, it doesn't even evaporate or anything like that. It literally disappears and so like that, like the ice, instead of melting and there being water, it disappears. I guess it would be sort of evaporating, but like there's like no trace of it. So even with that, it'd be measurable. But anyway.
Some bromine. And in the other, I have a vacuum. And if I open the tap between these two, you will see spontaneously the bromine rush from one to the other. Now that is the simplest change we can have, perhaps, because all that happens is a change in entropy. In this case, the expansion into a vacuum, nothing else is involved. There's no energy change, there's no temperature change, there's no change except entropy.
So the heliocentric model says we live on a ball surrounded by water, surrounded by air, adjacent to a void, a vacuum of space, to the lowest pressure possible. Why doesn't the air all fly up? And the only answer you can come up with is, well, gravity's holding it down. What about high up in the sky where gravity's supposed to be less? How come it's not sucking all the air up? Gas violently fills the available space. But for some reason...
So how do we have a vacuum in space?
Exactly.
What do you have to say to the photographs, satellite images that have been provided to us?
Satellite images. So what's satellite images? Here's the blue marble that was on everyone's iPhone. And if you look at the clouds, made in Photoshop. Right? And the guy that made this, his name is Robert Simon. He's a digital artist for NASA. He said he made it in Photoshop. 2012 image, 2002 image. Look at the United States. How did it get so much bigger? Here's a 1978 picture and a 2017 picture. Right? But what's wrong with that picture? All the clouds are the same. So from 1978 to 2017, the clouds never changed. Identical.
I see the circled one. Yeah, you're right. Why don't we have a photo of Antarctica?
Exactly. And if you look at Antarctica from space,
always clouds?
No, it's not clouds. It's cartoons. They don't even have images.
Whoa,
No.
other planets are spherical. So if this is that, then that must be this.
You ever looked up in the sky and seen Jupiter?
I've never even seen a planet in the sky, I'll be honest.
Okay, well, you have. You just didn't even notice it because they look like a bright star. Disney and NASA that work together want you to believe in other planets and other worlds, okay? We can zoom in on stars and planets and their pulsing orbs of energy. What are they? Love to know. I don't know. Your head is the sun, and it's holding on to the earth, and it's pulling it. It's letting it go fall around you. Okay, right? But I got a moon here, and this moon is going around the earth. When it comes towards the sun, shouldn't the sun kind of pull it a little bit? And when it comes around away from the sun, shouldn't it be slowed down a little bit?
But the laws of inertia, right, would argue that it's stuck in this elliptical.
You're making up things because you're trying to defend your position.
Well, I mean,
the globers will say that the gravity of the earth negates the gravity of the sun. So the sun can hold on to the earth, can hold on to Pluto, but it can't affect the moon. You know who is in charge of all international flights? NASA.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
NASA is in charge of
Actually?
And they run GPS.
Not a commercial plane has flown over Antarctica?
No, none, ever.
Whoa,
why? Because you can't fly over Antarctica. Look at the earth. They'll come over Antarctica, and then they'll just come back. But there's so many pilots now that have spoken out, military and commercial pilots.
A little bit too much for my brain.
This one's going to send you over the edge.
All right.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Yeah, over the edge. Southern flights prove that the Earth is not a ball. This is the World Cup soccer.
Oh.
Okay. They were in Doha. They wanted to go back to Buenos Aires. They went to Rome to refuel, and then they went back there. Why didn't they just go here? Because if they did, there's no place to refuel out here. On a flat Earth, Doha, Rome, Buenos Aires, Taiwan to Los Angeles. They had an emergency right about here. Well, where would you land? Well, you could go to Hawaii. You might as well go to Los Angeles. Instead, they went all the way to Alaska. Okay?
Flat Earth.
Right? Flat Earth, Taiwan, Alaska, Los Angeles. Okay. So here's an emergency. They were going from New York to Hawaii, right about here. And they said, we have to land. So they went to Seattle, which is like 1,000 miles out of the way. They got there in record time. New York, Seattle, Hawaii.
Yeah. Who's directing the airlines to construct these flight pathways?
NASA. So here's the thing. NASA isn't a space agency. NASA is the World Intelligence Agency. Everyone reports to them. FBI, CIA, KGB, CCP. Well, why would they lie about the shape of the Earth? What difference does it make? NASA was created right after Project High Jump when Admiral Byrd flew out in Antarctica. On the other side of the South Pole, he found land bigger than the United States, filled with resources. Look at that. From Middle America, he would be in where South Africa is or where Australia is. And another continent the size of the United States that no one has ever seen or set foot upon? What does that mean? What if he went from Middle America over what they call Antarctica and then found another continent out here?
Then that would destroy our whole worldview of reality.
Now, what if there's other civilizations here? What if these are where the controllers of the world live? Okay? What if...
I'm getting chills right now.
Because the reality, your soul is going, yes, listen, right? Get rid of your programmed mind. People don't realize, well, Russia would have ratted us out and this and that. They're all in it together. Everything that you know is a lie. The United Nations map, Flat Earth map, International Maritime Organization, Flat Earth map, World Meteorological Organization, Flat Earth map, International Civil Aviation Organization. These are the things that control the world. Why do they all have flat Earth maps?
Well, I don't know. Artistically, maybe they couldn't.
Artistically? Is that your explanation? Now, let me ask you a question. If this is where we live, would you call this the outer space?
Sure.
What is it? More land? Extra territory? Extra terra?
Extraterrestrials.
Extraterrestrials from where?
Outer space.
Bingo. So why does it matter? When you understand, we're actually at the center of creation. This place was built for us. And we have natural law, which says that nobody can take our free will away. Once you understand that nobody has control over you, you take your power back. You stop feeding this beast system that we're in. Globers think they know everything, but they don't know anything. And it's only for those that are willing to look and understand and see why.
Okay, so as someone that obviously knows the majority of the population are globe earthers, I know people that are literal geniuses that are globe earthers, and it's just because they're so experienced and educated and knowledgeable within their own expertise or careers or whatever you want to call it, like professions. They have not considered this stuff, right? So they're just like so they just naturally assume that everything that they know is correct, which is unfortunate because like even with people within my family, like there's so many freaking academics in my family, and yeah, it's really, really difficult and challenging to even get like a freaking argument out, especially amongst the men, like my uncles and my and my close family, who again little geniuses, but then also freaking like the footballers, like the athletes. Oh my God, like alpha males, and so like they will just like do anything not to freaking hear like these arguments and be considered to be incorrect, especially in front of their children who are like in their 20s and 30s now. They don't want to have it. It's funny, not funny. It is what it is though. Nope.
Why it matters, they get it. You know, once you get it, you can't unget it.
Is the Earth flat? Is gravity real?
I don't even know what to think anymore.
Come to conclude that the Earth is a sphere. I will give anyone $1,000 right now outside if you can prove me wrong.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
So wait, hold on. You were a flat earther, but now you're not? That doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely does.
Can't prove a closed mind.
I was gonna let you pass, but that was kind of a crazy movie did in there to get some good footage in your video. Are you gonna end with where they can find more information, or are you gonna leave that?
All right, tell the viewers.
If you want more information, go to flatearthdave.com. Don't believe anything that you heard in this video from him or from me or from anybody else. Go verify it yourself.
Why is there so much misinformation? Why is there a giant disinformation campaign going on right now when it comes to things like flat Earth? Why are people being hired by like Disney, Walt Disney, you know, the mainstream media giant, so that huge YouTubers like Logan Paul and others can discredit it? If it's such a ridiculous idea and a conspiracy theory, then why do they need to discredit it? Why do they need to censor it? More importantly, filter through search results now, you can't even find critical thinking and information on this topic. All independent research of sending balloon satellites up into the sky show what? Flat horizon. The horizon actually rises with the eye of the viewer. You don't have to look down. Why is it that railroads, when they're built, don't account, the engineering blueprints don't account for the alleged curvature of the Earth? If you're building a bridge miles and miles and miles long, let's say in Key West, wouldn't you have to account for the alleged sphere of the Earth? How come airplanes...
You know, it's funny, not funny, but I've even like discussed this with structural engineers and or seen the work of structural engineers that have debunked like the 9/11 towers going down just by planes. Look at my videos on Rumble Dawn 189. But then asking them questions about like, do they factor in the curvature of the Earth, 8 inches per mile squared, in their designs for things like bridges and other things, and they don't. They don't. And I have engineers in my fucking family. Okay, I can confirm this. Again, someone that is an academic and that has like knows a lot of fucking engineers, astrophysicists, you fucking name it, PhD level and such, and gotta ask the hard questions. And don't think or assume that just because you're an expert in your field, that it makes you an expert in general in life. right? Just because you have one of the more difficult degrees does not make you smarter than someone that has a political science degree, for example. It really doesn't. Like that, like it's what you know and how you implement it and research and experiment and verify and things like that. And there's a lot more to life than also being book smart as well, because even books can be incorrect. And so again, if you're not measuring this and applying it practically within nature, then you're missing the whole friggin' point. It would actually be better for you to do this within nature and on the ground, than just reading a book blindly. And yes, I will say the same thing about religions and someone that is a believer in a creator, in a creating universe and higher level beings, absolutely. But the way we're interpreting the world is, I think there are subtle psychological, I guess, just like operations within that are perpetually keeping people stuck and divided. And this is just like, again, the lies about this is just it unravels so many other things. And that's why I talk about all this stuff, because it's all connected. So it's all the same people writing the scripts.
That fly crisscross around the country don't also have to account for aviation changes and altitude changes on the curvature of the Earth. If the Earth is allegedly curved, wouldn't the plane have to go a little bit nose down every several miles that it's flying to compensate? If the Earth is allegedly spinning, 747 flies 500 miles per hour, wouldn't the Earth be spinning faster than the plane itself and eventually catch up to it if, let's say, the plane was flying east? When you begin asking these fundamental questions, you'll begin to understand that most of what you get on all the topics I just discussed, and believe me, there's many more, are disinformation campaigns. You want to know?
So my Rumble's not working, so I don't even know if this is even being viewed on Rumble right now. If anyone has any questions or points or anything like that, I can't see it at all. So I'm just seeing this on StreamYard, and luckily this is a YouTube video, or you wouldn't even be able to see it, which is frustrating. But anyway, this is almost over, so bear with me.
The biggest disinformation campaign? The Flat Earth Society. It's controlled opposition by the deep state to make people that even consider these scientific inquiry seem insane.
I never ask anyone to simply just believe everything I'm saying. In fact, please don't. That's how we've gotten into this whole mess to begin with, by blindly following others who say they've already done the research for you. You allow deceptions to occur. Please do your own research and test all things.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Okay, so that's a good video. Let's see if I can actually see this. Whoops. I can barely see. I got this on directly on my face, and I'm definitely not complaining about it. But there is another video I wanted you to see. And this one is by Eric Dubay.
The air around it.
Another great video by Eric Dubay that I highly recommend people look at all of his videos.
If you fill a balloon with helium, a substance lighter than the nitrogen, oxygen, and other elements which compose the air around it, the balloon will immediately fly upwards. If you fill a balloon with hydrogen, a substance even lighter than helium, the balloon will fly upwards even faster. If you blow a dandelion seed out of your hands, a substance just barely heavier than the air, it will float away and slowly but eventually fall to the ground. And if you drop an anvil from your hands, something much heavier than the air, it will quickly and directly fall straight to the ground. Now, this has absolutely nothing to do with gravity. The fact that light things rise up and heavy things fall down is simply a natural property of weight and density. That is very different from gravity. Gravity is a hypothetical magnetic-like force possessed by large masses which Isaac Newton needed to help explain the heliocentric theory of the universe. Lady Blunt says, Most people in England have either read or heard that Sir Isaac Newton's theory of gravitation was originated by his seeing an apple fall to the earth from a tree in his garden. Persons gifted with ordinary common sense would say that the apple fell down to earth because, bulk for bulk, it was heavier than the surrounding air. But if, instead of the apple, a fluffy feather had been detached from the tree, a breeze would probably have sent the feather floating away, and the feather would not reach the earth until the surrounding air became so still that, by virtue of its own density, the feather would fall to the ground. Wilbur Voliva, a famous flat earther in the early 20th century, gave lectures all over America against Newtonian astronomy. He would begin by walking on stage with a book, a balloon, a feather, and a brick, and ask the audience, "How is it that a law of gravitation can pull up a toy balloon and cannot put up a brick? I throw up this book, why doesn't it go on up? That book went up as far as the force behind it forced it, and it fell because it was heavier than the air, and that is the only reason. I cut the string of a toy balloon. It rises, gets to a certain height, and then it begins to settle. I take this brick and a feather. I blow the feather. Yonder it goes. Finally, it begins to settle and comes down. This brick goes up as far as the force forces it, and then it comes down because it is heavier than the air. That is all." David Wardlaw Scott says, "Any object which is heavier than the air, and which is unsupported, has a natural tendency to fall by its own weight. Newton's famous apple at Woolsthorpe, or any other apple when ripe, loses hold of its stalk, and being heavier than the air, drops as a matter of necessity to the ground, totally irrespective of any attraction of the earth. For if such attraction existed, why does not the earth attract the rising smoke, which is not nearly so heavy as the apple? The answer is simple, because the smoke is lighter than the air, and therefore does not fall but ascends. Gravitation is only a subterfuge employed by Newton in his attempt to prove that the earth revolves around the sun, and the quicker it is relegated to the tomb of all the Capulets, the better will it be for all classes of society." Thomas Winship says, "The law of gravitation is said by the advocates of the Newtonian system of astronomy to be the greatest discovery of science, and the foundation of the whole of modern astronomy. If, therefore, it can be shown that gravitation is a pure assumption and an imagination of the mind only, that it has no existence outside of the brains of its expounders and advocates, the whole of the hypothesis of this modern so-called science fall to the ground as flat as the surface of the ocean, and this most exact of all sciences, this wonderful feat of the intellect, becomes at once the most ridiculous superstition and the most gigantic imposture to which ignorance and credulity could ever be exposed." Einstein's theory of relativity and the entire heliocentric model of the universe hinge upon Newton's law of gravitation. Heliocentrists claim that the sun is the most massive object in the heavens, more massive even than the earth, and therefore the earth and other planets by law are caught up in the sun's gravity and forced to orbit perpetual circles and ellipses around it. They claim that gravity also somehow allows people, buildings, the oceans, and all of nature to exist on the underside of their ball Earth without falling off. Now, even if gravity did exist, why would it cause both planets to orbit the sun and people to stick to the Earth? Gravity should either cause people to float in suspended circular orbits around the Earth, or it should cause the Earth to be pulled and crashed into the sun. What sort of magic is gravity that it can glue people's feet to the ball Earth while causing Earth itself to revolve ellipses around the sun? The two effects are very different, yet the same cause is attributed to both. Furthermore, this magnetic-like attraction of massive objects gravity is purported to have can be found nowhere in the natural world. There is no example in nature of a massive sphere or any other shaped object which, by virtue of its mass alone, causes smaller objects to stick to or orbit around it. There is nothing on Earth massive enough that it can be shown to cause even a dust bunny to stick to or orbit around it. Try spinning a wet tennis ball or any other spherical object with smaller things placed on its surface, and you will find that everything falls or flies off and nothing sticks to or orbits around it. To claim the existence of a physical law without a single practical evidential example is hearsay, not science. Lady Blunt and Albert Smith wrote, "That bodies in some instances are seen to approach each other is a fact, but that their mutual approach is due to an attraction or pulling process on the part of these bodies is, after all, a mere theory. Hypotheses may sometimes be admissible, but when they are invented to support other hypotheses, they are not only to be doubted, but discredited and discarded. The hypothesis of a universal force called gravitation is based upon and was indeed invented with a view to support another hypothesis, namely that the Earth and sea together make up a vast globe whirling away through space, and therefore needing some force or forces to guide it in its mad career and so control it as to make it conform to what is called its annual orbit around the sun. The theory, first of all, makes the Earth to be a globe, then not a perfect globe, but an oblate spheroid, flattened at the poles, then more oblate, until it was in danger of becoming so flattened that it would be like a cheese, and passing over minor variations of form, we are finally told that the Earth is pear-shaped, and that the ellipsoid has been replaced by an apoid. What shape it may assume next, we cannot tell. It will depend upon the whim or fancy of some astute and speculating scientist. How is it that gravity is so strong that it can hold all the oceans, buildings, and people stuck to the underside of the ball Earth, but so weak that it allows birds, bugs, smoke, and balloons to casually evade its grips completely? How is it that gravity holds our bodies clung to the underside of a ball Earth, but yet we can easily raise our legs and arms, walk or jump, and feel no such constant downward pulling force? How is it that gravity can cause planets to revolve elliptical orbits around a single center of attraction? Ellipses by nature require two foci, and the force of gravitation would have to regularly increase and decrease to keep planets in constant orbit and prevent pulling them into direct collision courses. Thomas Winship says that the sun's path is an exact circle for only about 4 periods in a year, and then of only a few hours at the equinoxes and solstices, completely disproves the might have been of circular gravitation, and by consequence all of gravitation. If the sun were of sufficient power to retain the Earth in its orbit when nearest the sun, when the Earth arrived at that part of its elliptical path farthest from the sun, the attractive force, unless very greatly increased, would be utterly incapable of preventing the Earth rushing away into space in a right line forever, as astronomers say. On the other hand, it is equally clear that if the sun's attraction were just sufficient to keep the Earth in its proper path when farthest from the sun, and thus to prevent it rushing off into space, the same power of attraction when the Earth was nearest the sun would be so much greater that, unless the attraction were very greatly diminished, nothing would prevent the Earth rushing towards and being absorbed by the sun, there being no counterbalancing focus to prevent such a catastrophe. As astronomy makes no reference to the increase and diminution of the attractive force of the sun, called gravitation, for the above necessary purposes, we are again forced to the conclusion that the great discovery of which astronomers are so proud is absolutely non-existent. And N. Crossland says, we are asked by the Newtonian to believe that the action of gravitation, which we can easily overcome by the slightest exercise of volition in raising a hand or foot, is so overwhelmingly violent when we lose our balance and fall a distance of a few feet, that this force, which is imperceptible under usual conditions, may, under extraordinary circumstances, cause the fracture of every limb we possess. Common sense must reject this interpretation. Gravitation does not furnish a satisfactory explanation of the phenomena here described, whereas the definition of weight already given does. For a body seeking in the readiest manner its level of stability would produce precisely the result experienced. If the influence which kept us securely attached to this earth were identical with that which is powerful enough to disturb a distant planet in its orbit, we should be more immediately conscious of its masterful presence and potency, whereas this influence is so impotent in the very spot where it is supposed to be most dominant that we find an insurmountable difficulty in accepting the idea of its existence. Heliocentrists claim the ball Earth is perpetually spinning on its axis at a mind-numbing 1,038 miles per hour, or 19 miles per second, and somehow people, animals, buildings, oceans, and other surface phenomena can stick to the underside of the spinning ball without falling or flying off. Take a ride on the gravitron at your local amusement park, however, and notice how the faster it spins, the more you are pushed away from the center of spin, not towards it. Even if the centripetal, inward pulling force of gravity did exist, which it does not, the centrifugal, outward pushing force of the ball Earth's supposed 19 mile per second spin would also exist and have to be overcome, yet neither of these opposing forces have ever been shown to have any existence outside the imaginations of heliocentric scientists. David Wardlaw Scott says, "We are not like flies which, by the peculiar formation of their feet, can crawl on a ball, but we are human beings who require a plane surface on which to walk. And how could we be fastened to the earth whirling, according to your theory, around the sun at the rate of 19 miles per second? The famed law of gravitation will not avail, though we are told that we have 15 pounds of atmosphere pressing on every square inch of our bodies, but this does not appear to be particularly logical, for there are many athletes who can leap nearly their own height and run a mile in less than 5 minutes, which they could not possibly do if they were thus handicapped." And Crossland says, "The attraction of gravitation is said to be stronger at the surface of the earth than at a distance from it. Is it so? If I spring upwards perpendicularly, I cannot with all my might ascend more than 4 feet from the ground. But if I jump in a curve with a low trajectory, keeping my highest elevation about 3 feet, I might clear a bound of space above the earth of about 18 feet, so that practically I can overcome the so-called force pull at the distance of 4 feet in the proportion of 18 to 4, being the very reverse of what I ought to be able to do according to the Newtonian hypothesis." Newton also theorized, and it is now commonly taught, that the Earth's ocean tides are caused by gravitational lunar attraction. If the moon is only 2,160 miles in diameter and the Earth 8,000 miles, however, using their own math and law, it follows that the Earth is 87 times more massive, and therefore the larger body should attract the smaller to it, and not the other way around. If the Earth's greater gravity is what keeps the moon in orbit, it is impossible for the moon's lesser gravity to supersede the Earth's gravity at Earth's sea level, where its gravitational attraction would even further outtrump the moon's. Not to mention the velocity and path of the moon are uniform and should therefore exert a uniform influence on the Earth's tides, when in actuality the Earth's tides vary greatly. Furthermore, if ocean tides are caused by moon's gravitation, how is it that lakes, ponds, and other smaller bodies of standing water remain outside the moon's grasp, while the gigantic oceans are so affected? Thomas Winship says, "If the moon lifted up the water, it is evident that near the land the water would be drawn away and low instead of high tide caused. Again, the velocity and path of the moon are uniform, and it follows that if she exerted any influence on the earth, that influence could only be a uniform influence. But the tides are not uniform. At Port Natal, the rise and fall is about 6 feet, while at Beira, about 600 miles up the coast, the rise and fall is 26 feet. This effectually settles the matter that the moon has no influence on the tides. Tides are caused by the gentle and gradual rise and fall of the earth on the bosom of the mighty deep. In inland lakes there are no tides, which also proves that the moon cannot attract either the earth or water to cause tides, but the fact that the basin of the lake is on the earth, which rests on the waters of the deep, shows that no tides are possible, as the waters of the lakes together with the earth rise and fall, and thus the tides at the coast are caused, while there are no tides on waters unconnected with the sea." Samuel Robotham says, "It is affirmed that the intensity of attraction increases with proximity and vice versa. How then, when the waters are drawn up by the moon from their bed and away from the earth's attraction, which at that greater distance from the center is considerably diminished, while that of the moon is proportionally increased, how is it possible that all the waters acted on should be prevented leaving the earth and flying away to the moon? If the moon has power of attraction sufficient to lift the waters of earth at all, even a single inch from their deepest receptacles, where the earth's attraction is much greater, there is nothing in the theory of attraction of gravitation to prevent her taking to herself all the waters which came within her influence. Let the smaller body once overcome the power of the larger, and the power of the smaller becomes greater than when it first operated, because the matter acted on is nearer to it. Proximity is greater, and therefore power is greater. How then can the waters of the ocean immediately underneath the moon flow towards the shores, and so cause a flood tide? Water flows, it is said, through the law of gravity or attraction of the earth's center. Is it possible then for the moon, having once overcome the power of the earth, to let go her hold upon the waters through the influence of a power which she has conquered, and which therefore is less than her own? The above and other difficulties which exist in connection with the explanation of the tides afforded by the Newtonian system have led many, including Sir Isaac Newton himself, to admit that such explanation is the least satisfactory portion of the theory of gravitation. Thus we have been carried forward by the sheer force of evidence to the conclusion that the tides of the sea do not arise from the attraction of the moon, but simply from the rising and falling of the floating earth in the waters of the great deep. That calmness which is found to exist at the bottom of the great seas could not possibly be if the waters were alternately raised by the moon and pulled down by the earth. David Wardlaw Scott says, even Sir Isaac Newton himself confessed that the explanation of moon's action on the tides was the least satisfactory part of his theory. This theory asserts that the larger objects attract the smaller, and the mass of the moon being reckoned as only 1/8 of that of the earth, it follows that if, by the presumed force of gravitation, the earth revolves around the sun, much more for the same reason should the moon do so likewise, instead of which that wilful orb still continues to go round our world. Tides vary greatly in height, owing chiefly to the different configurations of the adjoining lands. At Chepstow it rises to 60 feet, at Portishead to 50, while at Dublin Bay it is but 12, and at Wexford only 5 feet. That the earth itself has a slight tremulous motion may be seen in the movement of the spirit level, even when fixed as steadily as possible, and that the sea has a fluctuation may be witnessed by the oscillation of an anchored ship in the calmest day of summer. By what means the tides are so regularly affected is at present only conjectured. Possibly it may be by atmospheric pressure on the waters of the great deep, and perhaps even the moon itself, as suggested by the late Dr. Robotham, may influence the atmosphere, increasing or diminishing its barometric pressure, and indirectly the rise and fall of earth in the waters. Samuel Robotham says, bearing this fact in mind that there exists a continual pressure of the atmosphere upon the earth, and associating it with the fact that the earth is a vast plain stretched out upon the waters, and it will be seen that it must of necessity slightly fluctuate or slowly rise and fall in the water. As by the action of the atmosphere the earth is slowly depressed, the water moves towards the receding shore and produces the flood tide, and when by the reaction of the resisting ocean medium the earth gradually ascends and the waters recede, and the ebb tide is produced. This is the general cause of tides. Whatever peculiarities are observed, they may be traced to the reaction of channels, bays, headlands, and other local causes. That the earth has a vibratory or tremulous motion, such as must necessarily belong to a floating and fluctuating structure, is abundantly proved by the experience of astronomers and surveyors. If a delicate spirit level be firmly placed upon a rock or upon the most solid foundation which it is possible to construct, the very curious phenomenon will be observed of constant change in the position of the air bubble. However carefully the level may be adjusted and the instrument protected from the atmosphere, the bubble will not maintain its position many seconds together. A somewhat similar influence has been noticed in astronomical observatories, where instruments of the best construction and placed in the most approved positions cannot always be relied upon without occasional readjustment. In the past several decades, NASA has shown video of astronauts supposedly in low Earth orbit experiencing complete weightlessness or zero gravity. How is this weightless effect achieved if gravity doesn't exist? As it turns out, for the past several decades, NASA, together with Boeing, have been perfecting so-called zero-G planes and zero-G maneuvers, which are able to produce weightlessness at any altitude. Aboard modified Boeing 727s, specially trained pilots perform aerobatic maneuvers known as parabolas. Planes climb with a pitch angle of 45 degrees using engine thrust and elevator controls. Then, when maximum height is reached, the craft is pointed downward at high speed. The period of weightlessness begins while ascending and lasts all the way up and over the parabola until reaching a downward pitch angle of 30 degrees, at which point the maneuver is repeated. Therefore, all NASA's footage of astronauts aboard space shuttles or the International Space Station can be easily hoaxed and simulated in Earth atmosphere aboard a zero-G plane. In fact, watching footage of zero-G plane flights alongside footage of NASA astronauts supposedly floating around their space shuttles and space stations, no observable difference can be seen between the two. Astronomers claim to have measured all the planets' distances, shapes, orbits, weights, relative positions, and times of revolution, all based on the law of gravitation. And without gravity, their entire cosmology folds under its own weight. Without gravity, people cannot stand upside down on a ball Earth. Without gravity, the Earth and planets cannot be revolving around the sun. Without Newtonian gravitation, Einsteinian relativity, Copernican heliocentricity, and the entire Big Bang ball Earth mythos cannot exist and falls to pieces. Gravity, both metaphorically and quite literally, just does not hold any water, not as a sound theory of cosmology, and not as a law supposedly responsible for holding in the world's oceans. William Carpenter says, man's experience tells him that he is not constructed like the flies that can live and move upon the ceiling of a room with as much safety as on the floor. And since the modern theory of a planetary Earth necessitates a crowd of theories to keep company with it, and one of them is that men are really bound to the Earth by a force which fastens them to it like needles round a spherical lodestone, a theory perfectly outrageous and opposed to all human experience, it follows that unless we can trample upon common sense and ignore the teachings of experience, we have an evident proof that Earth is not a globe. If we could, after our minds had once been opened to the light of truth, conceive of a globular body on the surface of which human beings could exist, the power, no matter by what name it be called, that would hold them on would then necessarily have to be so constraining and cogent that they could not live. The waters of the oceans would have to be a solid mass, for motion would be impossible. But we not only exist, but live and move, and the water of the oceans skips and dances like a thing of life and beauty. This is a proof that the Earth is not a globe. Gerard Hickson said, nearly 100 years ago, Kepler suggested that some kind of unknown force must hold the Earth and the heavenly bodies in their places. And now Sir Isaac Newton, the greatest mathematician of his age, took up the idea and built the law of gravitation. The name is derived from the Latin word gravis, which means heavy, having weight, while the law of gravitation is defined as that mutual action between masses of matter by virtue of which every such mass tends toward every other with a force varying directly as the product of the masses and inversely as the square of their distances apart. Reduced to simplicity, gravitation is said to be that which attracts everything towards every other thing. That does not tell us much, and yet the little it does tell us is not true, for a thoughtful observer knows very well that everything is not attracted towards every other thing. The definition implies that it is a force, but it does not say so, for that phrase mutual action is ambiguous and not at all convincing. Gabrielle Henriette says, the system of gravitation which makes the sun the moving center of the universe, the awkward principles of which are anything but certain since they apply to invisible circumstances so that they cannot be checked, is here replaced by the old geocentric system universally accepted until the 17th century, in view, of course, of its undisputable obviousness, and in which the Earth, in a state of immobility and surrounded by the planets visibly moving round it, including the Sun, is at the center of our universe. These two facts, which explain almost everything, are firstly the positive existence above the Earth of a solid dome constituting the sky, and secondly, the non-material nature of the planets and constellations, which are not physical masses, but merely luminous manifestations without substance. These are the two circumstances which lead today to the fundamental transformation of astronomy. And Professor Bernstein, in his letters to the British Association, writes, the theory that motions are produced through material attraction is absurd. Attributing such a power to mere matter, which is passive by nature, is a supreme illusion. It is a lovely and easy theory to satisfy any man's mind, but when the practical test comes, it falls all to pieces and becomes one of the most ridiculous theories to common sense and judgment ever conceived.
There's just one more video I wanted to share regarding gravity. Or sorry, where the sun goes. But before I do that, actually, I can explain a little bit. I've already explained this in previous videos, especially my ones where I talk about electromagnetism. And Walter Russell and Tesla and Ken Wheeler and me, and how even with Walter Russell's the universe, he breaks down where it's in this universe, like one verse, one word, light in motion. It's one force that divides itself into two, which is electricity and magnetism. And within these, there's radiating and gravitational forces, right? So like it's one force experience, like one force puts itself into two. So gravitation, being measured in amperes, for example, is the desire of electricity to integrate into the appearance of form. And radiation is the desire for magnetism to disintegrate into the disappearance of form at the lower levels, being measured by voltages and with the sun being radiating and magnetic, and the moon being electric and gravitational in nature. And you can even see like the pushing forces of magnets. When you do like that, like tests with them too, like if you have like multiple magnets, like you can feel the force, the resistance, the push. Okay, and people are trying to explain away like electromagnetic forces in nature by saying that this is simply just gravity that's pulling down inwards from like 360 degrees. And even though like the spin in itself, it's more of a force, especially like 1,000 fucking kilometers per hour, or 666 miles per hour, however you want to say it, at the equator, and then zero, like not spinning at all. Look at that at the core, or at the north and south pole. Like again, that's also misinformation. And anyway, and so and people like Neil deGrasse Tyson can't explain these things because they don't know what the frig they're talking about, and they're just actors. And they have fake degrees, just like a lot of people within Congress and Senate and Canadian cabinet and things like that as well. And I'll share this again, but I should have went into history because I just pulled it up. Let's see if it is in history. Okay, so a flat Earth kitchen updated. This is by David Weiss.
Far distant.
And this is DITRH. This channel, go on these channels, go with what people like me recommend for channels if you want, instead of just doing your own searches, because the algorithms are not in our favor. There are people that are fake that are getting pushed up to the like the front of the list, right? And like a lot of people click the first link or the second link, like not the third, fourth page where you're going to see like my information and Ken Wheeler's information and Eric Dubé's information and Dave Weiss's information.
I have my camera filming across the surface, slightly above it. This line here is the path of the sun, and I have this bottle here to show you that it's just over 3 fingers above it. As we go down, we have our tropical forest, we have our blue glass cutting board, and some more mountains, if you will, as the sun continues to the end. 3 fingers, we have a level line. I'm going to flip the camera around, stick it here. I'm going to dim the lights and travel to the sun. I'm going to move my bottles out of the way. Here we go, my sun. See? And here we go. We follow the sun's path, staying level over our flat stationary counterplane. We cruise over the lower mountains. Of course, this is not to scale, and I could do this much higher if my kitchen was just twice as long. And we will get the same effect. I come to the end, to the firmament, and we stop. There's the camera, still at level, slightly above level, standing on the flat Earth. So here we go. I'm going along the sun's path, keeping it level to the flat Earth. heading past the mountains. Now, if this was truly the flat Earth, I'd have much more distance to go, and I could even have this much higher to get the same effect. We're just finishing, hitting the firmament, basically. And let's take a look.
You know, his arms like not moving, like up and down, I mean. It's just going downwards. It looks like it's going beyond the Earth.
I'm going to remove all of the bumps on the Earth. To show that I am above the counter, flat Earth, I'm going to just slide this along a perfectly smooth flat Earth. And I'm guessing that it doesn't set. Because the Earth has bumps. To show that I am above the counter, the flat Earth, I'm going to just slide this along a perfectly smooth flat Earth. And I'm guessing that it doesn't set. Because the Earth has bumps.
I hope you enjoyed that. I'm just going to make sure that it's on. So that's two amazing videos for you today, if I do say so myself, which I am. And I will leave it at that. And I hope that everyone does have a wonderful day.